Hello, I'm Michael Smith, LI-6400 technician here at LI-COR, and I'm going to demonstrate changing the Peltier cooler element on the LI-6400 head. If you're watching this video, you need to replace your Peltier cooler on your 6400 head. The symptoms that you might have might be that your cooler does not work at all, or it might not be able to control the temperature far enough away from ambient for you. So it could be that this cooler is resistive more than it should be, or open circuit. And we'll go through a test to see what is wrong with it before we change it. First thing you need to do is remove the bottom cover that has the serial number, normally, right here on it, to get to the connections for the cooler. It's pretty common for this to be tight, and you'll sometimes need to pry it off, this cover. I generally get under it with something. And you want to pull the cover up past this connector for the log button so that you don't bend that. The hose is out of the way and it should come off easily. Now the cooler wires go to these two white connectors, and you can just follow the wires, like from the left side, from this one, you can see it's this connector. The first two pins are this fan, the next two pins are the cooler. Now if you have this 6400 head sitting turned off for about an hour, the temperature on both sides of this heat sink, one side is the block of the cell block and the other side is the heat sink on this cooler. You want to have that at both sides the same temperature, so leave it turned off for an hour. Now we're just going to measure the resistance of one of the cooler elements here, and I'm hoping that that display is visible on the video for you. But when you go to make this resistance measurement, you want to touch your leads on there and take the reading immediately, because the current from the ohm meter is going to cause one side to get cooler or warmer than the other. .7 ohms. Okay, that's a normal cooler. We're going to change this cooler even though it's not bad. If it were open circuit, the cooler will not work at all. If it's somewhere around 5 to 6 ohms, you might see half of the efficiency out of the cooler that you need. Over 10 or 12 ohms, and the cooler is not going to work very well at all. We're going to change the cooler and splice the wires right here, because the wires from the cooler are not long enough to make it to this connector, and there are also crimped on pins on the wire ends that you're not able to replace. So we're going to make a splice right here. Okay. The fan is attached to the heat sink. This is the heat sink with the fins. And then the heat sink is then attached with 2 screws to the block of the cell. It's a lot easier to leave the fan attached to the heat sink than it is to remove these screws, and on older units you will have washers between the fan and the heat sink. It's a lot harder to put back together. So I'm going to sneak my Allen wrench through the fan and loosen these 2 screws on the heat sink and leave them in place. Okay, as long as I leave these two screws here facing down, they're not going to fall out, and this will make it much easier for you. There's a thermal conductive pad on the heatsink, this black part. In your kit for the Peltier cooler, you will get 2 of these pads with each cooler. You don't need to replace them unless they're damaged. Now the cooler has a pad on the other side here, and to get the cooler out you need to pry it a little bit. They stick to the rubber. Sometimes you break the cooler taking it out. There, this one came loose without damaging it. Okay, the old cooler, I'm going to cut the wires a little ways away from the cooler after they make this 90-degree turn. And you'll notice on the head, on this side, on the left side of the head, the black wire is up towards the handle. On the other side of the head, the black wire is down. So you need to pay attention to which way it's the orientation of it, or the coolers will fight each other. I'm going to bend this cooler in roughly the shape of the old cooler and cut its wires off with a little bit of extra length than what we had. We'll strip the wires 1/16 of an inch. You'll need to unwrap these wires a little. We'll strip these 2 wires. Now we'll need to tin all 4 ends. Oops. Sorry. It's often a good idea to get everything in the most comfortable position for you to work in. Sometimes the coolers don't like to stay in place once you've gotten one wire soldered, so you can just put a piece of tape across there and hold it still. Also, in the kit of parts that you'll receive, you'll get some pieces of heat shrink. This is 1/16 inch heat shrink, cut 1/4 of an inch long. Slip that down over the wires. You want to be able to have these wires in a comfortable position for you to hold them very still while the solder cools. So I get them where I want them. And then with a freshly tinned iron with fresh solder on it, and these 2 ends of the wire were already tinned, you can make a very clean lap joint. Slide the shrink just over our joint. and get ready for the next one. As long as there's smoke coming off your soldering iron, you've got a lot of flux on there, and this will turn out to be a very clean joint and very small. Next, you'll want to shrink the shrink. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use fire. As long as you don't stay on it too long. Okay, on this heat sink, when we mount it back on here, note that there are two gaps milled into the heat sink here, and that is where these two wires exit the place where the cooler sits. The wires need to be in those gaps or it'll get pinched and shorted to ground. I lay my cooler down, lining up one of those two screws, and start the screw. It's a challenge to get on there. I did it. Okay, start both screws, but don't tighten either one of them. It's not easy to see the second screw. Okay. Tighten each screw just till it barely stops, not giving it any torque. At this point, it moves slightly. Now you want to just tighten it just a little bit on each side until you feel the screw stop. Don't go beyond that point. The cooler is very brittle. It's got two ceramic sides. Check that the two wires are coming out of the two slots on here. There. The rest is reassembly, and the important part in reassembling this cover under the bottom is to make sure you don't pinch any of these wires between the cover and the block of the head. So you need to pull them into these gaps on each side. Make sure they're not pinched there. And then this bundle has to fit along this edge. Now, to make sure that the wires are in fact not pinched in there, slide this cover back and forth, and you can feel metal rubbing against metal, and you know there are no wires pinched in there. Now you just put the covers in the screw and you are done. So that's how you change the coolers on the head. If you have any other questions, you can contact tech support at LI-COR.